Hi there, thank you for joining us today. I'm Phil Irvin from the Saint Paul Seminary. I'm really honored to be joined by a couple guests from Catholic Relief Services here on campus. Francis Casey and Joe, say your last name for me. I haven't committed it to memory yet. Perdroville are from Catholic Relief Services. Both work on the clergy outreach team and are here to meet with our seminary community today and talk more about what Catholic Relief Services does. So while we were here, we thought we'd grab them and learn more about Catholic Relief Services work, talk about the church's role in mitigating and alleviating poverty around the world, and get to know these fine folks a little better. So thanks for joining us, and thank you guys. I know you have a busy schedule today, so thanks for jumping in and having this conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So off the top, I don't know exactly how to ask this, but what's it like out there in the world? So we're sitting in St. Paul, Minnesota, in this lovely recording studio with nice cameras and nice lights, and I know, at least I, for one, you see maybe urban poverty. A lot of us have been exposed to that, but you guys, particularly you, Francis, have been around the world working in all kinds of situations with all kinds of people. Mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say relatively we know we have it really good here in the U.S. What are maybe some descriptions of poverty you've encountered in your work, and we can use that to kind of frame up the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So my most recent travels have been to Ethiopia and Zambia, so I'm going to use those more or less as our examples today. And, I think even speaking about those two countries, in my experience, they look very different. There are elements of poverty that I think do look the same in a lot of places, though. And so, thinking about infrastructure, right? So from, where you're living, homes looking like in Ethiopia, more or less a collapsible home that you take with you because people are really tied to their livestock, for example, is like, kind of the immediate home structure is something you pick up and you bring with you. Running water, not necessarily accessible. A lot of the women and children walking 4 to 6 hours a day, sometimes 3 hours each way to grab water that's clean and accessible. So the basic things that we take for granted, I think often in our day-to-day lives, is something that is not so accessible and just looks very different. Access to food and nutritious food being a very different reality as well, depending on the context. Obviously varies greatly, but in Ethiopia, where the global food crisis is incredibly dire right now, that looks very, very different than what my day-to-day eating schedule looks like. And so folks maybe only having one meal a day, or not being able to know where their next meal is going to come from. Those types of realities are very real for a lot of our world, and a lot of our sisters and brothers in the church, in the Eucharist, as well. So those are a few things to name, but the bumpy car rides are often the most memorable pieces from my travel. So there's like the big things that we all kind of know and can conceptualize, like walking for water. Even that being said, it's like we have to be reminded, like, yes, that's out there. But then it's the little things too, like I drive on paved streets here every day. Yeah, and then I complain. We were joking about the construction on the walk over here, right? Like, just those things you take for granted in everyday American life, for sure. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I think that's a good starting place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So let's talk about Catholic Relief Services a little bit with that context. Why does CRS exist, and what does it do?
Great question. So Catholic Relief Services started in the aftermath of World War II, and really the need just continued, and basically folks who were involved back then with what was formerly War Relief Services said, there's still great need, let's hang on and continue to really serve the most poor and vulnerable communities of the world. So currently we're in over 100 countries, and roughly 8,000 employees, currently serving 250 million people each year through the work that's being done. It's an organization of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. So often people get us very well confused with Catholic Charities, but, if we have the bishops up at the top, we're right underneath as Catholic Relief and Catholic Charities, and then CCHD. I always forget the full acronym, but...
it's okay. It's the Catholic Church. There's lots of acronyms to remember.
Yes. The Catholic Campaign for Human Development, all within kind of that grouping right under the bishops. So we're work hand in hand with the bishops and our Catholic organization all around the world, and have a lot of great work as well in the U.S. that we can get into more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. This is our 80th anniversary year. So
are you serious?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So you'd love our little emblem.
Yeah. We'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
80 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you say those numbers, just the scope of what you're doing is it's pretty incredible. I liked this line off the website. It's putting the Catholic faith into action to help the world's poorest create lasting change. Maybe Joe, then Francis, what does that look like?
It looks like a response to Jesus' message to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and so for us to, take our faith that we learn about in America, which, in some ways becomes very internalized, our personal relationship with God, or in our local community. Sometimes some of us work with the homeless, some of us work with different local charity organizations, but to realize that there's so much more we can do by reaching out globally and addressing those needs. To me, that's what putting our faith in action really means. It's the multifaceted approach of reaching as many people as we can in the most effective means possible.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add, when we say to take care of our neighbor, that's not just within our immediate, that's our neighbor is our entire world. And I think with COVID, we saw elements of where that became a reality in a new way for us, right? And our interdependence as a global community throughout the pandemic. But in our own faith lives, our neighbor is not just Joe and Phil. Our neighbor is Javier and all of the people that I've encountered all around the world. Those are my neighbors and who I need to care for and feel compelled to care for as a Christian and as a Catholic.
Yeah. So let's get a little more specific. Who are some people or situations you've worked with where you've really seen this in action, and kind of just walk us through what that was like?
Yeah. Great question. So you have 3 hours, right?
Is
that our time frame?
You guys got much more important meetings than talking to me today, but you can just pick one or whatever works.
One?
Yeah, I know. It's hard.
No. Okay.
It's always fun putting people on the spot. Tell me a great joke. Tell me a great story. I know there's a lot there.
Yeah. I'll speak, I think, to an experience in Ethiopia. We were traveling with a group of seminarians. Part of my role is to bring seminarians overseas to see our programming firsthand. And then we have priests and deacons as well who support CRS and do similar immersion experiences. But yeah, I think to further set the scene in Ethiopia, long hours of travel and those bumpy roads that are, not paved all the way out to some remote villages that have really experienced incredible drought. And so they say, after 3 consecutive dry seasons, that's when animal life is at risk. And after 5 consecutive dry seasons, that's when human life is at risk. And so we had just passed the 3rd dry season. And so we were conversing in a schoolyard, children's desks, lots of folks gathered around under the shade and on a very warm day, but, given a break from the sun and the dryness, you could feel. And we were hearing about the stories of these individuals who had lost a lot of their livestock. And so, as I mentioned earlier, in Ethiopia, it's very like biblical, I think, in a sense. The people are pastoralists, and so they are really tied to their livestock. So that's their livelihood is really being able to have their animals and to sell their animals for their own food and necessities to support their families. And so a lot of these men and women had shared about losing livestock throughout this third dry season. And it was just like really, really heartbreaking to hear. And I don't remember the names of the individuals, but distinctly remember one man saying, one of my good friends lost all 20 plus of his livestock, but I still have 2. And what a blessing and sense of hope this man had, because he still had 2 of his livestock that he was able to really sustain still his livelihood in this incredibly difficult time. And so to hear their testimonies of how they drew their hope still in these times of really extreme food insecurity and drought out in this very remote area was just, certainly a lasting impression that sticks with me. After we had this talk, they kind of wanted to show us. They brought us over to this hill, and there were lots of animal carcasses that had started to decay as part of the drought, and it was just such a stark image, I think, just to be in this very, very dry area where it was just, you could feel the dryness, like you could feel it in your mouth, you could feel it on your skin. The sun was just like very, very warm. And to look out and to know that so many of the animals had been dying already. And then with that in mind, that 2 more dry seasons, and that's really when human life becomes so endangered. And so that was one of the recent experiences, I think, that really has put this reality to the food crisis and droughts that are going on in East Africa, which is really a big area of concern for Catholic Relief Services right now. And one of our areas that we're really trying to raise awareness for in the U.S. as well.
Sure.
So
what does Catholic Relief Services do to help a situation like that?
Yeah, a great question. So a lot of water projects are going on in Ethiopia. What we learned throughout the experience from hearing from the people in Ethiopia is like water truly is life, right? Like we often go thirsty maybe for a glass of water for a few hours, maybe if we're in class and we don't have our water bottle with us, or something like that. But to have a thirst that you have to walk 3 hours to quench, and not know if that is there. So CRS is really working with the local partners to implement water projects in the remote villages, and so digging like the boreholes and creating the infrastructure to support the water systems so that people are able to have the accessibility to the clean drinking water within a much closer proximity for both them and for their livestock, so that they, their livelihood can continue to thrive. And that means, for women being able to be home with their families often 6 more hours in a day, or sometimes even more, for children not to have to walk with their mothers to grab water. So opportunity for education increases. So, in Ethiopia, within that context right now, that water is like such a great need that's really a huge piece of where CRS is focused. And throughout the country, there's a lot of emergency food programming as well. So, giving out rations of food at different sites as kind of 2 pieces that are the most immediate needs right now.
And those are examples of things like you put a system or a structure in place like water, where it's like CRS does the work up front, but then you're setting that community up for like sustained success. Is that kind of the model, more or less?
Absolutely.
It is the model, but I think, CRS employs such a model of subsidiarity or localization that it's not CRS sending in U.S. people to build a well and then we leave.
Yeah. We're coming to save you. Now we're gone. Yeah.
We work with the local Catholic Church to come into the country. We hire local people. Our idea of subsidiarity and localization is the best people to solve their problems are the people that live there.
Yeah.
And so we work with them. We might do some consulting work on how to build it, how to do it, but we employ them. Our 8,000 employees, most of them are nationals of the countries we work in.
Wow.
Very few U.S. staff. And so working through those channels, they own the well or the borehole. They know how to take care of it, they know how to fix it, and they know how to keep it going. So it becomes a sustainability project as well as, an empowering the community to continue to thrive or to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and additionally, I think trying, CRS often having some of the technical expertise, working with the local partners. So like the local bishop staff, for example, in Ethiopia, working with them on some of the technical advisement, and then that stays within the community right long beyond when CRS is there and with the local staff, for example. So it's a
beautiful
big piece of our mission.
So we talked water, that kind of falls under the umbrella of agriculture. That's sort of one area of focus. You mentioned education as well. I mean, talk about a system that's sustainable, right? What does the educational piece that CRS does in these communities look like?
Oh, loaded question.
I know. Because you said 250 million people, right? It could literally be different in every community you're working with, right? So maybe just like the common threads are sort of what's trying to be achieved there and what the outcomes can be.
Yeah. So again, very context dependent. I think I'll switch to Zambia maybe just for another brief example. But in Zambia, which is much more of a peaceful country in context, they're not dealing with drought. For example, they're dealing with a lot of like maternal and child health challenges. And so one of like the education components there that's really big is working with pregnant mothers, lactating mothers, and really supporting education around having a healthy birth and making sure that there are folks in the community who are aware of like signs of risk, for example, during pregnancy or getting close to delivery, and being able to really save lives through that education. And so one of the programs that I visited was, it's called FANSER, and it's related to food and nutrition security. And there were like 190 of the volunteers showed up to welcome us on our trip, all 190. Not a single was left at home that day. And so, their focus was really on maternal and child health as one component. And then we went down the road and met with, I think it was roughly 30 volunteers for Mayanwana, which was mother and child program. So the maternal and child health program focused really on the pregnant mothers, but they all worked hand in hand because it's all very hand in glove. And so, but both models are that the volunteers then go and like sensitize or educate 10 to 30 different households on nutrition or on maternal health, child health, and they really are like the trainers that go out into the community. And so there's a handful of staff who work with the volunteers, and then the ripple effect is just massive on the education base. And so very impressive way of working and getting the education out there for these specific examples, but we have education really on all kinds of things. And so, you think about peace building being a big part of our work as well. Water, like we have WASH, which is water and sanitation and hygiene. So a lot of hand washing, education, and as different like outhouses are built as well, education around hygiene practices and like the list goes on and on. So
half-hour YouTube video, believe it or not, is not an exhaustive list of all that CRS does around the world.
Yes.
It's an emergency response and recovery piece too, right? You're saying you lived through Katrina, so that might hit home for you a little bit. But yeah, there's obviously times where natural disasters or different things happen, and there's a role there too, right?
Yeah. That's a big, often what we're most well known for.
Sure.
But really our development work, which is that building up resilience hand in hand with responding to emergencies, are both what we do. We are often the first on the ground, though, to respond to natural disasters, and that's because we work with the network of the church. So as folks know, the church is a trusted source of support and help in pretty much every country around the world. And so as we work with those local church partners, they already have the trust on the ground. So when an earthquake hits or when a major hurricane hits, like we're there already, and it's really easy to move resources to support the immediate needs through those emergencies. So a lot of like immediate, like psychological first aid, making sure that people are okay and have water and have a warm blanket if they're cold. They have a safe place to sit in that situation. A lot of emergency housing, food, and access to clean water are like the basic things you think about. Like if you were in a situation where your entire house was gone or there was an earthquake and all the infrastructure was down, like the immediate things is what CRS is really, really working on. So
amazing.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about, things very context specific, reaching millions and millions of people. There's tons of ways to do it. There's tons of different challenges that folks around the world face. How do you do all the work through an authentically Catholic lens and make sure that what you're doing is in line with church teaching and all kind of aligned that way?
Yeah, great question. So we're under the U.S. bishops, and so
that helps, I suppose.
Yes. We also have a board of bishops and lay people who really vet like everything we're doing. But everything that CRS does is following Catholic social teaching and Catholic moral teaching, and so we only partner with projects that are aligned with Catholic moral teaching, and if they're not, then we decline. The reality is that we work with a lot of different partners and a lot of different international organizations that don't always follow the church's teaching like we do, and so there's a lot of figuring that out. But we're at the table in those conversations and really have the influence to say, for example, when PEPFAR was going on, are you aware of PEPFAR?
I know, I've heard the acronym. Remind us what it stands for.
The President's Emergency Relief. I'm going to butcher under George Bush. I'm going to stay
under
away
W.
from names.
Yes. George W. Bush's deal. Yeah.
It was the response to HIV and AIDS.
That's right.
HIV and AIDS crisis. And so CRS was asked to be one of the main implementers for medication during the height of the crisis. But when we were asked by the government, we said no, because the educational component that they were tying within the program was not in line with Catholic social teaching and Catholic moral teaching. And so we declined, and the government came back and said, well, what do you need for it to work and for you guys as a really reputable agency to be able to lead on this response? And so we were able to influence the educational components, and the education agenda really focused on faithfulness and abstinence, and being able to influence in that way is like a huge success in our history, and being able to work in that space. And they estimate millions of lives were saved through PEPFAR. So it's things like that where we're at the table and able to
like
work
you're not
in
just
space.
saying, hey, no, we're not going to do that. Like there's actually influence to affect real change.
Yeah.
So safe to say CRS does not provide or fund abortion, artificial contraception.
Correct. Yeah, not at all.
And you're not going to partner with organizations who
So
do these things?
We do not work on any projects that support things against Catholic teaching. Like I mentioned, the world of international NGOs is vast, and we work with so many people that it's always a negotiation to figure out with a specific project, is that project in line with our teaching? And if it's not, we don't, or we negotiate until it is.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Switching gears just a little bit. So you're both on the clergy outreach team. Maybe you start, Joe. What do you do around here? Like, what's your role? And tell us a little more about that piece of it. That's obviously very relevant in the seminary world that's brought you here to the Twin Cities today.
Absolutely. We engage seminarians, priests, and permanent deacons throughout the United States in the work of CRS, with the primary goal of raising awareness of CRS throughout their faith communities, engaging in advocacy, legislative advocacy work.
Sure.
A lot of funding for a lot of these projects is actually through the U.S. Foreign aid bills. And because we are such a trusted source around the world, the U.S. leans on us to help carry out what those funds are used for. And so we need advocacy, legislative advocacy, to continue to keep foreign spending, at a sustainable level.
Yeah.
Usually it's about 1% of the total U.S. budget. So it's not a huge ask, but it's an easy one to for some Congress people to sometimes pick at and say, well, we can pull some out of there and such.
Of course.
So trying to engage communities in that work of advocacy, reaching out to their Congress people, and then also our community giving campaigns. A lot of people have heard of Rice Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
They grew up with it, maybe.
Oh, yeah. We had the rice bowl at my kitchen table growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, you bet. And our seminarians head up an effort every year, too, which is good.
Which is great. And a lot of our seminaries do. A lot of Catholics grew up with Rice Bowl. They don't always make the connection that Rice Bowl is CRS.
Yeah, right.
So we're trying to,
let's bring that all together.
To bring that all together and let them know that, what you did as a child helps this organization that you can help now as an adult, as a voting adult, as a income generating adult that you can donate some to and continue to increase that. And so my primary role is working with the priests and permanent deacons around the country to engage their communities further in supporting CRS and becoming, building a national movement to take care of, the most vulnerable people around the world.
Yeah. And you said you're getting the seminarians involved too, right? I can only imagine what a great piece of their formation that probably is. So
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Awesome. I wish we had way more time, but we are pretty much out of time. Got to get you guys on to bigger and better things today. Thank you guys so much for the time and really for all the work you're doing, and God bless it. And we'll keep you in our prayers as things move forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And God bless your work here at Saint Paul Seminary.
Thank you. Thank you for watching as well. Be sure to subscribe here on the YouTube. And you can also catch us on Facebook and Instagram, and check out all our work at stpaulseminary.org. Thanks a lot, and God bless.